I guess some things will always remain a mystery. One of those things is our host Pete keeps inviting me to come over here every 2 years. I don't know why, but given the fact that he asked me to come along, I just said yes. And this is this is what he asked me to do. What happened in the world and what's next? And ladies and gentlemen, it's in the year 2025. It's much easier to talk about what didn't happen in the world, because the most amazing things, I think the things, if we were here together 1 year ago and somebody, maybe even me, had said to you that the President of the United States would refuse, and many times, to explicitly say, no, I will not use the military to invade one of my ally countries. If anybody had said that that would be our future, I think many of us, maybe all of us, would have said, basically everything can happen, but those kinds of things, it's impossible. It has happened. So what happened in the world, what didn't happen in the world, and then what's next? Thank you, Pete, for this easy task. Let's be honest here. I have no idea. Nobody has idea. But don't walk away, because even if we don't know what to expect in the next 6 months or years or something, we still have the possibility to, by looking at things that have happened and that are happening right now, we could try to kind of prepare ourselves to something that could and maybe even will happen in the future. So it's not a lost cause for you to remain seating for the next half an hour, and then you can go enjoy your dinner and the party. So bear with me for the next half an hour or something. Basically, all of us are just pieces on this table. The big people are playing the game of chess, and we are a part of the game. We have no say in the game, but we are a part of the game. And I was thinking how to make sure that you don't walk away in the first 5 minutes. And this is my way of trying to keep you here, because I just want to take you to the little city of Peekskill. Are there any people here from the US, actually? Okay, I see a couple of hands. Peekskill, ever heard of it? It's famous for Mel Gibson was born there. That's basically the only thing Peekskill is famous for. Well, that's a lie, because there is another thing. This piece of stone is another piece why Peekskill is famous. And it's famous in combination with this car. Now, it's October 9th, 1992, when out of the blue, a piece of meteorite falls down on Earth, on Peekskill, and hits this car. And ever since, it's been a famous thing. As a matter of fact, there is even a website dedicated to the Peekskill meteorite car. And you can see all kinds of pictures and videos of the event happening. Now, the chances of a meteorite reaching the Earth and hitting a car and being captured on video, those chances are really, really small. And this basically applies to lots of things we have seen happening in the last couple of months. So I think there are a couple of moments in your lives, in my life, when you could actually ask the question, where were you when that and that happened? Right? Where will Pete be when he gets a second grandchild? He will never forget about it. So that's a question we all could ask ourselves. We will ask this question, but let me just introduce myself again for the people, even for the people who've been here 2 years ago. chances are you have no idea who I am. So my name is Edin Mujagic. I was born far, far away. Well, not so far as the people from the US, but a little bit far away from here in the country, Bosnia-Herzegovina. I was educated right around the corner at Tilburg University. Moved to Holland in 1992 at the age of 14. I became a father, 2 children, and we are spending our days in the ancient city of Almere. For the people who were born in Holland, this is a kind of tongue-in-cheek, because Almere is actually only 50 years old. So now let's just skip to the question. Where were you when this happened? April 2nd, 2025. It's evening in Europe, the TV is on, and we are all waiting for the Liberation Day from the US. The Liberation Day was this, the announcement from the President of the United States about the tariffs he will introduce for various countries. And I was looking at this image and I thought, where did he find that a country like Switzerland is having tariffs of 61% towards the US? Because that's one of the countries, that's actually the only country that on January 1st, 2024 had decided to abolish all remaining tariffs in the country. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, 61%? Where does it come from? The explanation was, well, you know, in the US, for some reason, at least this guy, for some reason, he sees the VAT as a tax. It doesn't matter that we apply VAT to everything made everywhere, even in our own country. In the US, they say, well, you know, it's not fair. So that's the reason. That's the moment I realized, I know now why he decided to announce this on April 2nd and not the day before. Because if this was announced the day before, I think the half of the world would have thought, it's April Fool's Day. This can't be true. But it was true. So where were you on the moment where this was the big news? And then from there on, we have seen lots of amazing things. Let's call them that. First of all, one of those amazing things was the one big beautiful bill, basically the spending bill of the US government for the next fiscal year. And when that thing was introduced, these were the kind of headlines you could have read in the newspapers around the world. Moody's, which is a company who says to the rest of the world how trustworthy somebody or something is, like a country, has said, well, you know, the US isn't as trustworthy as it used to be. Then we went on to the all-out war between the White House and universities in the US. This is actually a big deal. Not because there's a war of words between the US, between the White House and the universities, but education institutions in the US, they attract many people from all over the world to the US. And those people have the tendency to remain in the US. And those people have the tendency to start up new companies in the US. If you look at the Fortune 500 companies, so 500 biggest companies in the US, half of them was founded by immigrants or the sons and daughters of immigrants. So when you wage a war at universities, when you try to keep those immigrants from coming to the US, you're actually hurting the economy of the US in the long run. So I think it's a big deal. an even bigger deal is the fact that the US president wants to fire the chief of the Federal Reserve. And the last step in that kind of a war, as it were, was the decision to fire Miss Lisa Cook. Lisa Cook is one of the members of the governing council of the central bank in the US. And she has been accused, without any evidence so far, she's been accused of lying on her application when she was buying a house. And that was reason enough for the US, for the president of the US to say, I'm going to fire you. If she were to leave the Fed, she wouldn't be the first one, she wouldn't be the last one. But her leaving the Fed would be the most significant thing that's happened in that sense. And let me just take 5 minutes to explain why that would be an extremely big deal. When we talk about the Fed, Fed is obviously the institution who decides about the interest rates in the US. And not only in the US, because decisions on interest rates in the US have the tendency to spill over to the rest of the world, even Europe, certainly Europe. Now, there is a group of people deciding on the interest rates in the US, and there is a board of governors, which is made up of 7 people. They work at the office in Washington. So those 7 people get to vote on the interest rates in the US. They're not the only ones. When we look at a kind of a monetary map of the United States, we don't see 50 states. We see 12 districts, 12 parts of the country, and every single district has its own regional central bank. And every regional central bank has its own president. And the presidents of the regional central banks join the 7 people I just mentioned, and they together form a group of 19 people, and that's the group that decides about interest rates. Now, out of those 12 regional heads, as it were, in every given year, there's only 5 of them who actually get to vote. So in total, they meet, 19 people sit around the table, 12 people have the vote, 5 regional heads, and those 7 people in the governing council. Now, the President of the United States has just seen that it's almost impossible for him to fire people sitting on the governing council, one of those 7 people in Washington, D.C. But this is why a possible removal of Lisa Cook would and will be a big deal. Out of those 7 people, 2 of them have been nominated by President Trump in his first presidency. So he already has 2 out of 7 on the board. Just last month, one of the remaining people said, I have found a better job, I'm going to leave the Fed. And in the next couple of days, a nominee from President Trump will be confirmed by the Senate, and that will be the 3rd person on the 7 board person that has been nominated by President Trump. If and when Lisa Cook leaves the Fed, he'll get the chance to appoint the 4th one. And this is where it gets interesting, and not only interesting, it gets really important for all of us. Because, as I just said, it's almost impossible for the President of the United States to fire one of the members of the governing council. But I just told you that when we look at the group that decides about interest rates, those 7 with 5 regional heads, the 5 regional heads, all of the regional heads at the Fed, they are appointed and they can be fired for no cause, without any reason at all. They can be fired by the governing council in Washington. So if Lisa Cook was forced to leave, President Trump will have the opportunity to appoint 4 people in the governing council in Washington, and that will be the majority, 4 out of 7, and they will be able to fire every single regional Fed president who gets to vote without any reason. This is the route, as you would say, for President Trump to make sure that he can direct the Fed what decisions to take about interest rates. And every time the Fed board gets a new member, he or she gets a term lasting 14 years. So if he is able to remove Lisa Cook and appoint somebody else, he or she will be sitting at the Fed up until 2038. So President Trump, with removal of Lisa Cook, President Trump will be able to influence the interest rate decision taking in the US till far in the next decade. This is the reason why the case Lisa Cook is extremely important. She's not the first, she would not be the first to leave the Fed. She won't be the last to leave the Fed, but it would be the most important removal in history of the United States. Well, at least in history of the Fed in the United States. So, let's go back to this big, beautiful bill. When it was published, you read all these kinds of horror stories in the newspapers, ticking time bomb. And then it's always wise to have a close look at any decision that's been made, certainly in the US. When you look at the big, beautiful bill and the US Congress, it was the actual vote on the big, beautiful bill was 215 votes for it and 214 against. So the majority of 1. It would have been scary if 70–80% of the people in Congress said, this is a good idea. But it's not been the case. You have a slight majority, just 1 vote. And it gets even more, I would almost say, laughable, because a day before the vote, a Democratic guy has died. If he didn't die, if he was present in the Congress, the one big beautiful bill would not have a majority. It was an extremely close call. Second part, I've highlighted it because it really gets extremely weird here. There was a Republican who was present during the vote, but he didn't vote neither for or he didn't say yes or no to the bill. He was there, but he decided not to vote. And then there was another guy who just fell asleep. Now, these 2 people, this is the only logical thing that I could find in this whole vote, and I will tell you why. The big, beautiful bill consists of well over 1,000 pages. It's an extremely, indeed, big, beautiful bill. Now, the people who were supposed to vote on it, they got the bill the evening before the vote. Now, you would think that when lawmakers are voting about something, they know what they are saying yes or no to, right? As the people in the US would say, there is no way in hell they could have read the whole thing, understand the whole thing, to vote the next day on it. The last 2 guys, it's the only logical thing. I think the first guy who was saying, yes, I'm here, I'm not going to vote, he did that because he was saying, well, before I vote about something, I want to know what am I saying yes or no to. And I didn't get the chance to read it. And the last guy, I think he actually tried to read it the night before, and he was reading and was reading and was reading, and in the morning he was like, it's page 600, I have 400 pages to go. And he was reading, running to the Congress, and when he got there, he fell asleep. But it was the slightest majority you could have, which means that it could happen that there is a strong opposition in the Congress in the US, meaning that lots of ideas contained in the one big beautiful bill would never see the light of day. So let's not, when you hear news about that big beautiful bill and all of the other things, you always have to think, how high is the chance that it will actually become reality? And I think lots of those things will never see the light of day. Well, and this is even the more important thing is to remember this guy. Anybody know who this guy is? Sir Isaac Newton. And he's famous for lots of things, but one of the things he was famous for is he has given us the laws of nature. And the third Newton law says it's the law of when you do something, when you there is a reaction to it, action, reaction. And this is something you should remember when you read about or hear about the news coming from the US. The US has this wonderful system of checks and balances, basically meaning it's really hard for one person in the US to do whatever that person wants to do. I know when you look at the last 6 months, you wouldn't get that idea, because you would get the idea President Trump is able to do everything he wants to. Well, let's have a closer look at the checks and balances, because this mechanism has actually started to work right now. We are seeing examples. There is a number of cases that have been brought before the US judges, and they actually said no. Just going to give you one example. You know this Liberation Day thing on April 2nd this year? A couple of weeks ago in the US there was a case about it, and a 7 panel of judges, they said, well, you know what? You have taken that decision based on a law from 1997, from 1977, but you have misused that law. So your tariffs are for a large part illegal. Now, obviously, President Trump said, I don't care about what you say, I'm going to ask a higher judge to look at it. That's happening right now. But the point is, there is a kind of a resistance which is happening in the US right now. In the Congress, as I just said, all those bills are like the big beautiful bill. They haven't been voted on by 70-80% of the people voting, saying yes, but it's a slight majority, one vote only. So it's not like the whole country saying everything that has been done, everything that has been coming from the White House is okay. Makes a big difference. And at the end of the day, the ultimate form of checks and balances will be revealed in November next year, because in November next year the Americans are again going to vote, not for the president, but they will have the say for the US Senate and US Congress in general. And personally, I'm waiting for that moment just to see, are the American people accepting everything that has happened since January 21st of this year. And I think if we get a vote saying, basically saying to President Trump, you've gone too far, that's going to give us hope that the US will, at the end of the day, remain a trustworthy partner for all of us. Sadly, there's lots of things that can happen between now and November next year, but for me that's the crucial moment I'm looking for and I'm waiting for, just to see, are American people, after everything they've experienced in the first 2 years, are they still going to say yes to all of those things? So we have to wait just little over a year now, but then many things will be much and much clearer. While all of this is happening, there are actually good things happening outside of the US. When we look at Canada, we all think Canada is a country, right? It's a big country, but it's a country. What many people don't know is the provinces of Canada are a kind of a mini country within a country. Meaning, if you're a company from Quebec and you want to sell your stuff in Yukon, it's not as straightforward as you might think. You, in many parts of the Canadian GDP, you're not allowed to just set up shop outside of your own province. You have to, there are all these kinds of regional rules, and it costs a lot of money. In the last 20 years, the Canadian government has been trying and trying and trying to get the provinces to remove those things which are hampering the economic development of Canada, and every single try has failed up until now. Because faced with the kind of a hostility from the US, for the first time ever, Canadian provinces are saying, yes, we will remove all those obstacles we have in our own country, and to try to give the Canadian economy chance to grow despite tariffs from the US. And if they succeed, and the first steps have been taken, if they succeed, it's going to be a lasting effect in Canada. They will never go back to, let's get all those things back. So this is actually one of the good things happening because of all the things coming from the US. And the same thing is starting to happen in Europe. We have this European Union, 27 countries. And for many companies, if you want to sell your stuff outside of your own country, you have to abide by many rules which are hampering your business. And by hampering business of every single company, they are causing the GDP growth in European Union to be much and much lower than it could have been without those things. So, because of the things happening in the US, outside of the US, you see the reaction to it, action, reaction. So there's a reaction within the US, in the Congress, by the judges, but there's also reaction outside of the US, in Canada, in European Union. And the last thing, if you are in the stock market, the last thing you should do is, when reading the news about another thing coming out from the US, sell your stocks, because this is the graph saying to you, despite everything that has happened this year, stock prices are actually higher. And the only thing you have to force yourself to have is have patience. Because as anybody who has ever tried to put a seed in the ground for whatever. Has anybody done that? You've done it. When you go outside of your house, you make a little hole in the ground, you put the seed in it, right? Ground on top of it. Did you ever get up the next morning, the next day, go back into your garden, take the seed out to look how it's coming? You didn't. You have to have patience, and the same applies when you invest in the stock market. Patience. Don't go sell or buy based on news. There's always been news, there will always be news. You have to have patience, because if you don't have patience, if you try to act based on your feelings, the chances are you will sell low and buy high. And believe me, that's not the way to get the most out of your money. Yes?
You mentioned in your book 1971 the effect of Minsky.
Yeah.
Nowadays stock prices are sky high.
Yeah.
Is to expect the soon moment of Minsky moment, instability?
I think we have seen a lot of instability over the last months. It wouldn't surprise me if the stock prices went down in a week time, month, 6 months. I have no idea. But stocks and stock prices tend to go up, and they also tend to go down from time to time. But if you invest in stocks, if you have patience, if you don't go back to get your seat in the well, nothing is happening. So if you stay in the stock market for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, the chances are you will end up earning money and not losing money, whatever happens in the meantime. So don't give up, basically. Now, just for the last 10 minutes or so, there is this, we are all focused on the US and things coming from the US and all the trouble in the US and the US causing all kinds of trouble outside of the US. In the meantime, you would almost forget that we in Europe have troubles of our own which have nothing to do with the US. And one of the big issues in Europe are the pensions. How are we going to pay for those? And in Germany, they have a really big problem in Germany. They are trying to do something about it. So the last kind of a big scheme in Germany is, let's get the parents to invest 10 euros a month for the children in the age 6 years to 18. And if you do that every single month, 10 euro every single month, you will actually provide your son or your daughter with some money when he or she retires. Now, I understand when you look at this and you think, 10 euros a month, that's almost laughable. How are you going to solve the pension problem by investing 10 euros a month? Well, if you do that, and given the fact that in the long run, sir, in the long run, you tend to get 7% return in the stock market, if you invest 10 euro a month, when your son or your daughter turns 18, he or she will have what amount? Any guesses? 2,200 euros. This is not going to solve any retirement problem at all. But you're 18, you get 2,200 euros. If you just leave that money, you reinvest it, there is no additional contribution. 50 years later, when you stop working, when you retire, there's going to be an amount of 65,000 euros waiting for you. Again, it's much higher than 2,200 euros, but no, it's not the solution for the pension problem in Germany. But when you turn 18, you finish your school, you start to work, right? And when you start to work, most likely you will be able to say, well, you know what, I'm going to leave 2,200 euro to be reinvested, and I will add 1,000 euro every single year. If you do that, 50 years later, you almost have 500,000 euros. And if you really like investing and you say, you know what, I'm going to put aside 500 euros a month, 50 years later, when you're 68, you'll have 2.5 million euros on your bank account. This will be able to solve the pension problem of the young Germans right now. But you have to start investing. And if you hear invest 10 euro a month, don't laugh, because these are the sums that you will end up by, certainly by saying, well, when I turn 18, I'm going to invest 500 euro every single month. 2.5 million when you decide to stop working. So, let's stay in Europe. Italy was always a kind of a, how should I say it politely, a basket case, basically. Everything that was possible to go wrong, Italy did it. Well, the good news, ladies and gentlemen, for Italy at least, there is another contendant for the prize of the basket case in the European Union, and it's France. France has been doing a lot of bad things, not only France, by the way, and this is just one example of headlines you can come across reading the newspapers nowadays. There's actually talk about France having to ask International Monetary Fund to help the country, which is a big, big deal. Now, I think this is one of the most scary charts I can show you. And let me just explain it a little bit what you see here. The yellow part in the bars, that's the amount of money, the value of all pension benefits that have been promised to people in each of those countries. So, for example, when you look at Germany, you see that to be able to pay out all the pensions that have been promised to Germans, that amount is about 350% of the German GDP, which is a huge amount. What you're looking for are the blue parts in the graph. The blue parts represent the money you have actually put aside to pay people when they stop working. And as you can see, there is only just a couple of countries in Europe where you can see actually any blue. Holland is one of those countries, the Scandinavian countries. But look at the big four in the European Union. Look at Spain. Look at Italy. Look at France. Look at Germany. They have all these promises that they have made to the people. When you stop working, you will get this and this amount of money. They have no money set aside for it. And this is a big, big problem in Europe. So we all should be less focused on what's happening in the US, and we should try to solve this. Because if anything is a ticking time bomb in Europe, it's this. There is no money. We have started in the age of aging. We have more and more people retiring every single year, and less people starting to work every single year. In those kinds of situations, this is a big problem. Because the only way you could solve this problem is either you say to all those retirees, by the way, the promise I've made to you, I'm not going to be able to make it. So you'll get the half of the money I have promised to you, which is a big thing because those people are the same people who get to vote. And as a politician, you try and you hope to be re-elected. So the other possible solution for this problem is to go to the people starting to work and say, you know, I know you're paying a large part of your salary for the retirees right now. Guess what? That part is going to get even larger now. Nobody likes to hear that. And then there is the third way, the easy way. And for the future of Europe, really the way you hope they will not take, but the chances are they will. We're not going to say your pensions are going to be cut in half. We're not going to say to the working people that they have to pay more. We're going to get another loan as a country. And we'll use the money we don't have to pay the pensions in Europe. And this means that out of 20 countries in Europe that share the euro, 19 countries have almost no money set aside for retirees, except for Holland. And when you got 19 countries which already have huge amount of national debt, when you got 19 countries even increasing that amount of national debt, it's going to mean higher taxes all over the place for you and me, for companies in Europe, and it's going to mean higher inflation down the road. So I understand this focus we have in Europe about all the things happening in the US and the consequences of things happening in the US. But it has also been misused as a kind of a way to get people to look outside of Europe when we have this big problem in our own house and we are not doing anything to solve it. Now the only thing, and that's the good news, and that's the last you will hear from me, the good news is we all can do something about it. And the magic word is investing in the stock market, not saving money. Sadly, saving money nowadays means you actually lose money, because if you live in Holland and you go to the bank and you say, I want to save, you'll get about, I don't know, 1% or something. The inflation rate in Holland right now is between the 3 and 4%. So your actual savings rate, or what you get on your saving when you're saving money, is actually minus 3%, because you have to deduct inflation from the interest rates you're getting. So 1 minus 4 is minus 3. By saving, you're losing money. The only way to prevent that is go to the stock market, have patience in the stock market. And there was a book published a couple of years ago, Richer, Wiser, Happier. There was a guy who went to all those kinds of people who have been investing on the stock market for the last 20, 30, 50, 40 years, and they have made huge amounts of money. And he was talking to every single one of them, asking them, what's your secret? And this book contains all those people he has met, everything they've talked about, and he has managed to distill the secret of investing. And the secret of investing, ladies and gentlemen, boils down to escaping the deadliest dangers. So if you invested on the stock market, but you didn't invest in countries like Malaysia, Taiwan, etc. in the 90s, if you didn't invest in the tech companies at the end of the 90s, and if you didn't invest in the financial companies in 25 and 26, 27, only by avoiding those dangers, you would have had an extremely high rate of return. So investing is not only trying to spread the risk around, because by spreading the risk around, you're still taking risk. It's only been spread on many things. But the best way to earn in the stock market is A, be patient, go in it for at least 5 years. And the second one, try to avoid the risks. And the company I'm working for, we see the euro as a big risk because of the things I was just showing to you. 19 out of 20 euro countries have a big pension financial problem. So we are trying to avoid investing in the euro. We are investing in the US. Despite everything that's happened in the US, we're still keeping the money in the US. And with regard to the future, let me end with this nice poem from Robert Frost, which he said, well, you know, nature throws all kinds of things at us, trying to get us down. But every single way, you can see it here, there's a tree falling on the road and blocking the road, and you cannot go on. And your inclination is to give up. But at the end of the day, the nature, he writes, and yet she knows obstruction is in vain. We will not be put off the final goal we have hidden in us to attain. We always find a solution for everything. We always find a way. That's been the case for the last 2,000 years. That's going to be the case in 2025. And that's going to be the case in the years ahead of us. So don't give up. And if you are ever inclined to give up because of, again, something happening, either in the US or outside of the US, please, please, force yourself to be the guy taking the penalty in this video. Just when you think it's hopeless, I've lost, it's useless to do anything else, please don't give up. History is on your side. The future, despite everything we have been seeing the last couple of months, the future is bright, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Thank you for the great presentation. In your work, you emphasize how central banks shape the economy. Do you think that with this de-dollarization and everything that's happening around that and the CBDCs that are being introduced, will it shift us into a new monetary paradigm?
Let me ask you, if I was to drop you from a plane with a parachute, we are flying above Congo or something, and I'm about to push you off the plane with the parachute, and I give you one question, one choice. You get to choose which kind of money you're going to take with you. What's the currency you would say, well, give me that? Is it the US dollar? Is it the euro? Is it CBDC? Is it Bitcoin or anything else? Which one would it be for you?
In that sense, it would probably be food.
Well, I'm going to give you an option. I'm going to give you an option. You have to choose a currency. Which currency would you take with you? You can only take one.
I would probably take a gold is not in the...
Never.
You're trying, but these are the options. US currency, European currency, yuan from China, I don't know, you have to choose one. Which one would it be?
It would be right now that you drop me off.
Yeah.
I would probably pick the dollar.
Yeah, and I think you would probably make the same choice even if you really hate the US. Because you know why? When you get down in the jungle of Congo and you have to buy food, chances are you will be able to buy anything with US dollar. So when you read things about countries trying to move away from the dollar because they have this, they hate the US, okay, I understand that. But the reality is, it's easier said than done. If you have a company from Chile or something doing business with a company from Taiwan or Vietnam, the payment that will be made is going to be made in US dollars. And even if the company from Chile is saying, well, you know, I hate everything that has anything to do with the US, still they will demand US dollars from the company in Vietnam. Why? You could ask the company in Vietnam to pay you in Chinese yuan, for example. But then that company from Chile has to buy stuff they have to use from Brazil or something. And the company providing that stuff to the company in Chile is most likely to say, you know, I know you have the yuans or anything else, or the euro for that matter. I really want the US dollar. So the dominance of the dollar, which has been built up in the last 50, 60 years, it's an illusion to think that any country in the world will be able to move itself from the dollar within the next 5 years or even longer, whether you like the US or not. And let me just, I was reading a book written by two guys born from the country I was born in. And what they did is they went on a journey on the Silk Road, you know, through Asia and something. And on their way, they were going to Saudi Arabia. And they were driving the car in Saudi Arabia, on the road there. And well, when you're driving a car, you have to pull up and to fill the tank in your car, right? So they went there, they filled the thing up, and they went inside to pay. And that's where the trouble started. Because the guy behind the counter said, you know, I only take the local money, the real indeed, or the US dollars. And those two guys from the country I was born in, they had a little bit of US dollars, but it was not enough to pay the bill. What they did have is a stash of euros. And that was a big mistake because they pulled out the money, euros, and they offered the guy behind the counter to pay in euros. First of all, the guy almost tried to hit them. Second of all, he called the police. Why? Because he didn't believe that was real money. So 25 years after the introduction of the euro, there is a guy in Saudi Arabia, on a main road in Saudi Arabia, still believing that it's fake money. This is the kind of stuff I think about when I read people saying, you know, the euro will be able to take over from the US dollar. Maybe in 2050 or something, but really not right now. And it, again, just the last point, even if you hate everything about the US, in the financial world, there is basically no no way you can remove the US dollar from your business right now. And lots of people and lots of countries would like to move from the dollar, but the reality, you always have to go back to the reality is it's almost impossible as of now, and it's going to remain impossible for the next years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Edin, thank you so much for your speech, and I'm trying to reflect it with the speech you gave 2 years ago, where the key takeaway was more on you can't trust the dollar as much because it doesn't have the gold foundation supporting it, and we're moving towards a multipolar world where we see that the place of the dollar will diminish. And then we had the elections in the States, and I was fortunate enough to be with Pete in the States when the elections happened. And after that, you saw a huge shift from people that were underestimating the dollar to a conversation which is more similar to your speech today, where we say never bet against the dollar, basically. Do you feel that this Trump and the Trumpism has awakened this momentum of making America great again, not only as a slogan, but as tangible economics?
Yeah, sure. But the only thing I'm saying is I understand this wish for many countries to indeed be less dependent on the US and on the US dollar, because you know now if you hate the US, well, but if the US hates you, you have a big problem. So I understand that. The only thing I'm saying is, as of now, there is nothing that is a viable alternative for the US dollar. Will it happen in the future? Sure, because the US dollar hasn't always been as dominant as it is now. The country having de facto the world currency before the US was the UK. It was the British pound. And when you look at the amount of time it took the US dollar to take that position from the pound, it's about 20 to 25 years. So these kinds of shifts, we see them in history, but those are the revolution. Those are not revolution. It doesn't happen fast. And it has all to do with what we were just saying. If you're a company from Chile, you hate everything about the US, you're still going to demand US dollars, because the reality is you cannot say, I'm not going to use it, because if you decide to stop using US dollars right now, you're out of business. So 2040, 2050, maybe the euro or something else, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of time.
Maybe one follow-up question. So when we look at emerging markets, do you believe that their prosperity will be in the foundation of their own currency, or will that be, again, the dollar?
I think the prosperity of any nation is caused by investments you made in research, in development, in schools, roads, infrastructure, basically. And I think there are lots of countries, lots of emerging countries investing more money therein, and that's the way to move from being a country that is in development to a developed country. I don't think it has to do anything with what kind of currency yourself use, as long as you make sure that people in your country, starting with the people in your country and then people outside of the country, that they get confidence in you. That's the only way to move from being a developing country to a developed country. So I would focus myself on those kinds of things and not thinking about, am I going to use the US dollar, or maybe I will choose the euro or something. Do what you have to do as a country.
Can I challenge on one thing?
I think you have lots of people hating you right now because they're all waiting to go outside.
Final question. According to that logic, so the most passionate country in the world is China. The country that is investing the most in their infrastructure is China.
Yeah.
What does that bring us to?
Well, I finished my studies in 2002, and with a couple of friends, we actually went to China and spent, I think, 5 weeks in China. And a part of that journey was going from Hong Kong to Beijing. And it was a nice journey lasting 27 hours. When you take the train from Hong Kong to Beijing now, it takes you 8 hours. So China is doing lots of things. When you transform this into the discussion, is your currency able to take the role of the US dollar? a couple of things need to be in place for that. And one of those things is if you invest your money in China, as a company, for example, and you have a disagreement with a company in China and you bring your case before a judge in China, you have to trust that the judge in China will look at the case and not say, well, everything what the Chinese company wants, I'm going to give it because you're not from China. The trust in judicial system in China, I think it's almost zero. So as long as those kinds of things are not repaired, it's going to be extremely hard for China to play a role they want to play in the world. And despite everything we have seen in the US, one of those things I just showed you, the judges in the US still, down the line, still it's independent, and we have trust in those people. And I wouldn't put my money and trust in the judges in China. So if you force me out of the plane, I would have the same choice as you. Give me US dollars.